Hello and a warm welcome to this episode of the Business Agenda. I'm Guguletu Cele. Today we talk about the renewed optimism that we see around African economies and the increased interest in investing in these particular geographies. Now the numbers are well documented that in a short space of time, 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies are based on the African continent. Not only that, but African economies are now posing to deliver double-digit GDP growth figures. And we have a youthful population. But how do we capitalize on all of these opportunities and also conquer the risks and threats to doing business on the continent? Well, today I've got an esteemed level of panelists who are with me today to walk us through these particular themes. I'd like to introduce firstly Andrew Hannington, Chief Executive of Grant Thornton Johannesburg, followed by Philip Mayback, who is the Head of Franchising for the rest of Africa at Standard Bank, and Lesiba Motata, who is a market and economic commentator at Investment Solutions. Now, we're not alone. We are joined by our wonderful audience today who will be participating in the panel discussion, posing questions and their opinions to the audience members, despite them being silent for the moment. Well, let's get into the very first half of our conversation. And I want us to do a quick fire experiment just to get your feelings about the growth rates as well as the level of optimism that we're seeing in Africa, rather. It has been noted in one of the books from a panelist who will join us later today that Africa is the new gospel. And it's our responsibility to be the evangelists who preach this new type of religion. But are we managing to win souls over to understand and believe and buy in, more importantly, to the African growth story? Let's start off with you, Anthony, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest level. How optimistic are you about investment as well as growth on the African continent?
5 would be my answer. Gugu.
Average? Tell us why.
Yes. Still the political uncertainty of investing in Africa. There are still issues around some of the despot leaders in our continent.
We've got a 5 there, Philip, from your perspective?
I'm slightly more optimistic, Gugu. I would say at about a 7. Yes, there are risks, as Andrew pointed out, but I think the opportunities are significant, and therefore my positive views.
We've got 5, we've got a 7. Lesiba, are you going to meet us halfway maybe here?
Well, I'm at a 6. There are strong growths, but the headwinds, the structural issues that need to be considered, there's a lot that can be done. Much more can be done. There's great potential, but it needs to be unlocked. Yeah.
I want us to maybe highlight some of the challenges first and maybe the typical mistakes that several business owners, many of whom might be seated in this audience, often make when it comes to investing or approaching the African continent. And that's clustering the continent as one piece. It's made up of 54 states, Anglophone, Francophone, and Portuguese-speaking states. And Philip, maybe let's get your perspective here. I take it that's the #1 downfall, and have you encountered this in some of your interactions with your clients?
It's definitely one of the dominating downfalls, Gugu. I think if I can perhaps use an example of the food retailers. I mean, each country has a very specific taste profile, a very specific culture, the way they eat, what they like. I mean, if you just use the food, it's just so different from country to country, and you cannot make the mistake of seeing the whole continent as one country. And even within those specific countries, you have got a variety of cultures, like we have in South Africa, that are also very specific and unique in what they like and what they dislike. So absolutely one of the key things that people have to consider when doing business in these respective countries.
Lesiba, you're the numbers man, and I take it oftentimes things don't always add up. You can compare SA to some of its SADC counterparts, and despite us being in the same region per se, but again, different economies, different approaches, different cultures as well.
Indeed. The thing about it is, to have a viable consumer sector, it needs to be backed by employment. And we've seen that, yes, Africa's youth, they're youthful, the populations are youthful, but the rates of growth are not pulling enough people into the workforce. And that's problematic, because you need people employed in order to sustain retail activity and all other sectors, including the financial services. So we need growth rates that are much more inclusive and broader based. Yeah.
Andrew, to come to your perspective, because you need to talk people through some of these challenges clearly, and some of them are not as responsive to hearing your feedback, I take it.
The challenges of the infrastructure, as we say, the unemployment, skilled workforces, we don't find in Africa. So it is difficult to have a world-class economy in Africa. It's more a basic economy we'll find, Gugu.
I want us to highlight two of those challenges that you alluded to. Skills we'll come to in a moment, but infrastructure. It's well documented that it is lacking on the continent, and that maybe when companies approach the continent and looking to invest there, they need to expand their perimeter. In other words, source your own power supply. Look for diesel and have that as your backup plan if there is a shortage for electricity in that particular region which you operate in. Likewise, when there are several logistical challenges. Are businesses who are looking to invest and expand on the continent thinking that way, that they need to extend and expand the way in which they will deliver their services to that region?
Certainly, Gugu, it's a resources-rich economies across Africa, and so the railway lines are going in. People are looking at putting in ports, are looking at putting in the airports as well. And so if you look across Africa, you'll find a number of airports are built from foreign money. So yes, they have to look at Africa very differently from what they look at Europe or other parts of the world.
Is it enough though?
It'll never be enough.
Philip, maybe walk us through that as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen big brands come back from Africa with bloody noses. And I think there's a lot of brands that have sat on the fence and watched this happen and have learned from those mistakes. And even some of those brands are going back now, taking those learnings back into Africa. And they're realizing that they have to take charge of their own destiny by controlling their supply chain, by controlling their logistics. So in a way, they find themselves doing types of business that's sort of outside of their core, but it's absolutely necessary to ensure that they deliver that customer experience that they ultimately wish to deliver.
But how does a business owner do this without the support of government? In the regulatory environment, which also differs again from state to state, do they often form the right partnerships with the right people? And also, maybe if we stick this to government for a moment before we run into, some of the underhanded tactics that get involved to do business on the continent.
I think you mentioned the key word there is partnerships. It's making sure that you find the right people in those respective countries that are on the ground, that understand the challenges, and that have those respective relationships with government in that specific country, with key business leaders in that specific country. But to come from outside and think that you're just going to dump something into the country and have success is a massive mistake. So it's important to, whether it be auditing firms, your bankers, and other types of key partners, make sure that those guys truly understand what's happening in that country.
Lucy, I'd like to come to you and then get your thoughts on this, Andrew, but the lack of cohesiveness and clarity that we see when it comes to regulatory framework as well as economic incentives for investors, does this add yet another barrier to foreign direct investment for corporates in the continent? Andrew, you can also give us your feedback on this in a moment.
There are always challenges in many regions. If you look in Asia, they also have issues. You look in South America, they have issues. Africa also has its own issues. That said, there's a lot of progress that has been made, particularly if you look in the eastern side of the Sahara. The Kenyans, the whole eastern, the eastern side of Africa. They have done a lot of work to make sure that infrastructure is being invested in. There's participation not only from foreign investors, but the government itself has led the steer in terms of what should happen in infrastructure. While there are challenges and there are needs for infrastructure everywhere. If you go to India, there's a huge need for infrastructure. So it's not unique to Africa. More can be done, but I think there's been strides made and they need to be applauded. If you look at in terms of foreign investment, I was looking at numbers of foreign direct investment. If you look at in the last 14 years from 1990, we've seen a huge inflow of foreign capital in Africa. In fact, it was only $3 billion total sub-Saharan Africa in 1990. It has now grown to $54 billion. And that suggests that there is activity that's happening. Different sources of funding is on board. One, FDI. Two, capital markets in terms of raising issuances of bonds that is increasing both in the local yield curve, local market, also in foreign currency. We have seen that, for example, Kenya has been able to raise a lot of money in dollars in the euro bond market, but it's really dollar capital, and we've seen that they've been successful there. So there are many sources of funding for infrastructure that are coming through, which I think are very positive. and positive for Africa. Yeah.
Andrew, from your perspective, to go back to that lack of unity, clearly there's something that we can learn from the East African communities, but SADC losing the plot. What about ECOWAS? And not forgetting other states which are based in Central as well as Northern Africa. The lack of uniformity, is that, again, a barrier despite the increased flows that we've heard from Leseba?
Yeah, Gugu, the way we've approached Africa is to divide it up into 4 sectors. So we have the one sector coming, the southern sector out of Johannesburg. We have the Eastern African sector, the North Africa sector out of Casablanca, Lagos for the West Africa, and those guys are working in that and know those sectors. I think the mistake we make, Gugu, is to think that we can bring external knowledge and dump it on Africa. We're in 23 countries with local partners who know the local market. It's to use those guys and to work with them when you go into these countries and not bring in your outside thought processes and outside ways of doing business, but to learn from the locals.
On that learning from the locals, is that also something that you implore, Philip?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I've mentioned the points already, but you cannot emphasize the point enough to say each country is different. Partnering with the local people is very important for that local knowledge aspect. Yes, there's best practices that you can bring from elsewhere, absolutely, but it's finding that right combination of local knowledge and best practice from an international perspective to ensure that whatever you want to deliver to your customer is within line with that expectation.
How do we maintain that level of trust in the partnerships, given the fact that it's well documented that Africa is one of the most corrupt places to do business in the world? It's a difficult one. Does it need government intervention? Does it need the private sector to be more open and public in exposing the fact that to enter certain markets they have had to deliver brown envelopes under the table? Andrew?
Yes, we hear about all these horrendous stories. We as South Africans, we don't understand it. That's not the way we do business. And it is unfortunate that one hears these stories. We try and stay away from those kind of areas when we're doing business as advisors at Grant Thornton. And we encourage our clients to do it per the book and to abide by the local rules and regulation. But it's this issue of lack of enforcement across many economies that we have difficulty with.
How difficult is it, though? Do you need to deal maybe with a client who has the same mindset as yourself versus someone who's just in there to invest, make their money, and return profits to shareholders?
It's a difficult one. You need to be working with the clients indeed, yes. And it's not only just about wealth of shareholders. There is investment in the local community. There is social responsibility. It's all of those aspects.
Leseba, I want to come back to you for a moment. If we can just quote some of the numbers once again when it comes to the type of negative impact that these illicit financial flows do have on African economies.
Yeah, it's problematic that that corruption has taken root in our continent, but it's not unique to Africa. Look at Russia. It's very difficult to do business in Russia. Look at Beijing. If you arrive in Beijing without the knowledge of the language, without understanding what's happening in the local economy, very difficult to arrive. In fact, most South African, companies have not done well, but there's been equally others that have done well, but some also have failed. You know what I mean? In Beijing. So what I'm trying to say is that these corruption issues, these underhand conversations are not unique to Africa. They're everywhere in the world, notwithstanding what happens in Europe. So what needs to happen is to understand the market, particularly and how it's been driven, and also invest according to that basis. But it's not like it's an African problem only. Yeah.
I want us to talk about the involvement as well of other parties. So often we always read about China in the headlines and its increased involvement and investment into the African continent. How do we balance our interaction with China as an investor coming through to help Africa with its infrastructure drive, but also balance the needs of African economies where we're trying to boost small and medium-sized enterprise development. We're trying to grow our own businesses, and not only that, but get the youth involved in transforming the face of this economic picture of Africa. Our relationship with China, how do you at Standard Bank deal with it? Do your clients view it more as a threat or a potential opportunity for that word again, partnerships?
Yes. All in all, it's very much an opportunity. I mean, we see the influence of China all over the continent, and in absolutely most instances it's positive. They're having a positive impact on the infrastructure of the respective countries. They're forming good relationships with the local governments. And private sector is coming on the back of that and saying, well, with this improvement in infrastructure, it helps me with my business. I think the challenge just is to make sure that the value that's being created is a sustainable one. And I think Lesiba mentioned around sustainable growth. So it's just important that the way that we approach these projects, the way that they're structured, the type of relationships that are developed, that one of the goals must be for sustainable growth and sustainable development within these countries to happen. But overall, China has had a very positive impact in the countries that we are present in anyway.
Andrew, given the fact that, as you alluded to, you're in 23 countries, at some point you must have interacted with several Chinese investors.
Indeed, Gugu, we run a China Asia desk out of Johannesburg, and we see a lot of our clients coming through Johannesburg to go and invest in Africa. Philip, I wonder about sustainability. I wonder when the resources are gone, whether the Chinese will still be in Africa. I wonder when we look at the railway lines, when we look at the airports, when we look at the ports, is it not because there's resources at the end of that railway line? I worry 30, 40, 50 years out whether the Chinese will have that same amount of interest in Africa and the sustainability beyond that.
Having said that, though, then from an economist's point of view, how do we ensure that we diversify economy so that we're not so overly reliant on these natural resources? Because yes, oil and gas might be fantastic for Mozambique, Angola for the moment, but as Andrew alludes to, once they run out?
Increasingly, you're finding that most African countries are diversifying away from natural resources. It was unbelievable to look at Nigerian numbers. 51% is services driven, not just petroleum and oil. If you look in the in the eastern side, Kenya is a well-diversified economy. And what actually you look now, if you see the fall in commodity prices is impacting most countries in the western side of the Sahara, not so much those in the east and down on the south. Increasingly, there are strides made to diversify the economy. Is it enough? It's not enough. But can more be done? Yes, indeed. But there are diversifications on the way. I do agree that the Chinese are a concern in the way they arrive in the continent. I do think that what is put down on the conversation point on the table needs to be reconsidered. It's not good for deals that are made in perpetuity of exchange of resources and just a minimal stipend that's given to the incumbent governments. I do think that is problematic, particularly on other parts of Africa.
Look, it's definitely it's a valid point. I think you'll be ignorant not to consider that point strongly. I think the way that I see it is, yes, we might not know where they'll be in terms of their interest in Africa in 40 years' time, but the opportunity is now to use this stimulation and this growth in infrastructure to create other sustainable economies, as Lesiba is referring to. How can we use that infrastructure that they're busy helping us develop to create other types of economies? I think that's where we need to focus on, and not so much what happens if China might leave due to their lack of appetite for resources perhaps in future. I think that's where you need to start thinking.
Having said that, I'm thinking of some of the sectors that you're alluding to, maybe manufacturing, to see Africa maybe develop into that particular hub and pick up from where China has left off. But does it also call maybe for the need for African economies and African governments and African investors not only to tie up with Chinese investors, but maybe look further afield? We have AGOA as well as partnerships with the United States of America, where they're also looking to drive power and energy development on the continent. The balance between East and West, do we just care about where the money comes from? Or as long as there's capital flowing, that's the #1 priority? Philip? Andrew? You look like you want to be quiet on this one.
That's quite a difficult one. Yeah, you can't just look at where the capital is coming from. But as a businessman, I guess, is just say who's going to give me the money and who's going to help me the fastest and who's going to build my airport for me and make me look good on the world stage. And a lot of the airports are built with Chinese money. And it's easier to get money from the Chinese. They're hungry for investment. They're the rising new world economy. And it's so, as a businessman, you'll take the Chinese money, I guess. You'll sell your house in Houghton or your house in Clifton or your business in South Africa. You won't worry at the end of it. The guy who pays you the best price is the one whose money you're going to take, aren't you? You're not going to say, well, is it the right money or isn't it? You're going to take your money, you're going to disappear. as a businessman.
Is that a mindset that needs to change, and who needs to employ
The
that?
world's become a very small place. I mean, you look at transactions in any of the countries that we do business in, it's not just the Chinese. There's huge interest from the Indian community, there's huge interest from even countries from South America. So you'll have transactions that you're looking at, and around the table you have people from all over the world that are interested in investing in that specific country or in that specific type of product that might be developed. So I think it might be narrow-minded just to focus on the Chinese. I think there's lots of opportunity, and everyone around the globe is seeing that the opportunities in Africa, and it's a race. It's a race for that frontier.
And I think it's good if you have alternative sources of finance. When we were in Beijing a few years ago, a big bank had said to us that the presence of China in Africa has narrowed the borrowing costs for many African countries. Because they were shut down and there were stringent conditions put for any finance, what you find even now in the bond market, you find that we can borrow at a spread that is narrower than it used to be when you look at funding, which I think is good. The cost of capital has come down by having so many competing sources of capital, which is a good thing. Yeah.
Well, we'll continue with our conversation in the second half of this, the Business Agenda, where we talk doing business in Africa. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to this, the Business Agenda, where we're talking doing business in Africa. I'm still joined by my panelists together with our audience, but we continue this discussion with Andrew Haddington. He's the Chief Executive of Grant Thornton Johannesburg. Philip Myburg, who's the Head of Franchising for Rest of Africa at Standard Bank. Lesiba Mutata, who's the Market and Economic Commentator at Investment Solutions. And we're happy to welcome Victor Swana, who's a business specialist on all things on the continent. We do continue our conversation with our audience members, who will be proposing their questions and opinions to the panel as we continue. Now, just before the ad break, we spoke about the Chinese influence as well as where the capital flows are coming from. But I also want us to talk about the people, because without investment in human capital, none of this growth is going to come through from a variety of sectors. And Victor, maybe let's welcome you in on the second half, where we know that more than 75% of Africa's population is under the age of 35. Some view this as what, a demographic dividend or a youth bulge. How do we capitalize not only on the youth that is presented by the continent, but also enabling them to participate in the economy while also being fairly rewarded?
Thank you, Uku. By buying in 100%. I mean, if you are going to build any successful business on the continent, don't go anywhere looking to find skilled people. Go there with the perception, attitude that you're going to build. You're going to be part of the solution. So successful companies on the continent are those who, one, are training staff within the countries or developing capacity within the country they are developing. Of course, you'll always have to buy skills, and you're never going to be short of qualified Africans. They might come a little at a premium because you may have to find them in London, you might find them in the US, but you will find them. But most of all, I think the best attitude is buy in 100% and be happy to build. It's a lot easier to build loyalty when you work with people that you bring up the ranks than when you try and poach somebody from somewhere else.
Philip, maybe this takes us back again to that broad approach that corporates need to take when it comes to investing in the continent, not only bringing your own logistics back up, but as Victor says, investing in the people. Are businesses open to that? And more importantly, the all-important question that Andrew might be happy to answer, how much do you pay them? Because labor costs in China are a lot different to what you find across the globe.
I don't think businesses have an option. They have to be open to it. As Victor said, I mean, you have to go in with the mindset that skills might be a challenge, and the ones that are skilled will come at a higher cost than what you could typically be used for, but you have to be part of the solution. I mean, it's one of the great things that we're actually seeing in some of these countries is the impact that big businesses are having on the general skills level within some of these countries, because they're spending so much money and time on the upliftment of skills in their workforce. So it has a very positive impact in the rest of the country. But I think I don't want us to lose the point regarding the demographic of these countries and the youth population. I think it's also important for the businesses that are doing their product development to understand what type of demographic these countries have, because the type of demographics would call for a very specific product and a very specific customer experience. So it's important to, when you think about your design, to keep that in mind.
Andrew, if you could go ahead, Victor.
Also, to understand the quality must be higher. If you're in South Africa, for example, you're going into Kenya, up your quality game. The very demographic that Philip is talking about means, and I've seen many companies hurt themselves because they say, we're going into Africa, the jungle where people don't have high standards, and they get surprised. Remember, the advent of information technology means people have access to information about what the Americans are using. So if you're introducing a phone, you better know that the youth in Kenya know what phones Americans are using, Europeans are using. In fact, I think there's a statistics that show that the sales of smartphones is outstripping the sales of other ordinary phones. Why? Because one, the smartphones make the cell phone much more versatile. It's able to perform a lot of functions which work a lot better, which works a lot better in Africa because of the lack of fixed line technology and broadband that we might be used to here in South Africa. Secondly, the young people, the very demographic you're talking about, is as keen on fashion, is as brand sensitive, and is as informed as what the latest trends are out there. And the biggest mistake you can make is to try and take whatever, the BlackBerry mentality, that you take whatever you can't use anywhere else and you dump it in the DRC. You'll be shocked.
You mentioned two pointers that I want us to pick up on, technology being one of them, but maybe Andrew, just your quick response, obviously, to the cost of labor, given the fact that Victor says that these are youthful people who are connected with the rest of the world, like he says, surely they'll be up on the trends again.
Go back to the Chinese issue, they bring their own labor. So, there's a couple of million Chinese people who are unemployed, and they are looking to come to Africa, and the labor rates are very low for those kind of people. So, they're not looking to employ lots of locals the way I see it. We as the professional firms, what we are, as I said, we partner with local professionals. We bring them back to Johannesburg for skills transfers. They come here often for training courses. We help with them. We have guys out of our Johannesburg office that go into Africa to assist with IT, to assist with business development, to assist with support services.
How do you tie that in, though, with localization, indigenization, or black economic empowerment? That labor battle, before we jump on technology. Lesiba, do we need to change the mindset of government, or is government on the right track by saying, look, give my people jobs, enhance their economic viability, but at the same time, feel free to bring in your labor to maybe upskill them and exchange skills with them?
No, I think it's problematic when we get a crowding out of local skills. When a big brother like China arrives in a project, etc., I think that needs to be changed. The conversation needs to change drastically. We need to construct deals that make sure that the locals are benefiting from the projects that are there. But the one thing is, we need to learn from Mauritius. It's working so hard to get its diaspora back into the economy. If you look at the amount of clever Africans in the world, as it was said, in New York, in London, notwithstanding our very own South Africa here, we are sitting with the most clever people in the world who can be useful in the incumbent countries. Mauritius is doing a lot of work to make sure that, when they come back, they are not taxed for the next 10 years. They can repatriate their money without any punitive measures that can be brought when they come back to the country. I think that needs to be copied in most African countries to hold on to their skilled labor, which there's far too much. There's too many.
And by the way, when he says we, he is talking about anybody who wants to expand into Kenya. So once you say I'm expanding into Kenya, you become part of that we. You become part of suggesting to the Kenyans that here's a solution that can work. I mean, last week, a guy called Patrick Awuah, a millionaire working for Microsoft, left the US to set up a university in Ghana because he wants to plow back into the country. He left a very comfortable job, which means don't just think of them only as people you have to attract with high salaries all the time. Some of them would like to come back because they are feeling lonely out there. Liberia, for example, most of the ministers are under 35 and they were educated in the US and they came back voluntarily. They didn't get attracted by high salaries. So there is an element of homesickness even in these clever Africans that are living elsewhere that you should try and tap into.
Let's touch on the capital for a moment and maybe some of the challenges that might be posed, especially when it comes to the forex markets. We know that there's extreme challenges and even a cause as well for some kind of unison with East African countries also maybe pulling together to have their own shilling. But as a businessman and one who consults as well to several corporates across the continent, how do you advise them on these challenges? Because the rand's value here might not be the same as the naira and the exchange rates and the effect thereof.
Well, I think you've got to look at each country on its own. I think it's very dangerous to make blanket statements on this specific point. But I think one of the things that you've got to remember is some of these countries do have their liquidity challenges. You know, we know the examples like Angola. You know, we know the Zambian kwacha has not been doing well. We know the Ghana CD has not been doing well. So each country's got its own challenges. But one thing that's very important for businesses is taking out of profits back into South Africa. And if countries got liquidity challenges, sometimes that's very difficult to bring back some of the money that you've made back into the home base. So it's something to consider, but it's definitely something that we can talk about and something that we can help you solve from a business partner perspective.
I'd like us to come to the audience in a moment where if there are any questions around some of the issues that we've brought up, you can present your questions to the panel or even your opinion. But Andrew, just to get your voice in as well on some of the FX as well as capital market challenges, how do you approach them when dealing with your clients?
Gugu, we leave that to the bankers. we stay with our expertise, accounting, auditing, and that kind of stuff, and we ask Philip to.
Regulation is never the same when
and
it
we
comes
ask
to
Philip and his
accounting,
guys to help us with that side of the business.
Is that a partnership that works well?
Indeed.
Well, you have to ask the clients, but I hope so.
Perfectly. Siba, you wanted to make a comment
I
there.
was to say it's because of fiscal policy that the revenue is mainly from one source. If you look at Nigeria, it's really revenue is from oil. So when you get oil price plunging as it has, it causes ruptures in the revenue side, which leaches into the banking side, and you get devaluations that needs to happen. So a lot of work needs to be done to diversify sources of tax revenue.
Which means you're only going to not be suffering from that forex fluctuations, which are inevitable in a growing economy, if you are in it for the long term. So if you are in it for a long-term play, you may ignore the short-term fluctuations because, yes, repatriation of anything can get hit by the dips in the forex, whatever exchange rate. Ghana used to be a star performer. It's struggling at the moment. Nigeria had a similar thing. In fact, just about even Uganda, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had something about that. I wanted to comment about the prosecution and lack of electronic anything. In fact, the
Yes, a comment that came up from the audience.
Again, it's a mentality thing. Go in for the long haul, buy in. In fact, my advice to anyone I talk to is do not do business outside of South Africa counting on the legal system. No, don't. Do business in a way that you don't have to go to court. Is that idealistic? Yes, a little idealistic. But if you consider what the DRC, it will cost you 161% to claim whatever you want to claim. I owe you $100, you sue me, it's going to cost you $160. I don't think it's worth your while. So do your strategy, select your partners, structure your business model in a way that you don't have to rely on the legal system. Rwanda is one country that everybody is praising because it's very attractive doing business. Try suing somebody in Rwanda. You won't like that country, because the legal system is not even built to match where the country is. So I say, if you are going to do business in any country, leave South Africa out of your mind. In fact, leave South Africanisms here. Get into any country thinking you are there to build. Select your partners and do your business in a way that you don't have to get sued or sue somebody, because if you do, you might rue the day you left your country.
And we've seen that with practical examples. Telkom in Nigeria with multi-links and several other companies.
Bank affecting the PIC here in Sierra Leone, not Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast, where a man, EcoBank, they fired their CEO and they thought, okay, we had complied with everything. He went to court. In fact, he took them to court in 2 different jurisdictions. One for unfair labor practice, another one, I don't know what. The court ruled in his favor in Ivory Coast, and there's still an unfair labor practice case pending. So I don't think you should be doing your business counting on the legal system, because it's going to disappoint you 9 out of 10.
Philip agrees. I'd like to come to the audience maybe just to get feedback on that, because maybe there are business individuals here who actually move into these economies relying on the legal structure, or if that's not the case, maybe give us your opinions. You can raise your hand and the mic will make its way to you, sir. Yeah, please wait for the mic, sir. Apologies.
The governments themselves don't have the ability or the tools to try and stamp out the corruption that we're talking about. They're not skilled. They can't get to the basis of it if they don't have the law that allows them to sort out the problem themselves. So if you've got those problems within your organization where someone has maybe been stealing and you can't take that action against them, then it just compounds itself. And the reality is that for Africa to attract businesses, to be able to do good business and be able to grow, you have to have that infrastructure and that law behind you to allow you to then know what the ramifications are in order and have that backing from government so that you can go forward. Not that the intention is to then go the legal route.
Yeah. He's right, and sorry, but I'm not mean to sound facetious. We have the laws here, sir. We are not able to enforce them, or there's no will to enforce them. So what do? We spend time in the media talking about the court cases, going back and forth, suing. What's my point? My point is, as it is, the African Union is challenging the ICC. So it's not only the country to country, it's also the global legal system. That African Union leaders seem to believe that the international system is not good for us. Proof of what I'm saying is, there's a former Chad dictator who is being tried in Senegal at the initiative of the African Union. That tribunal is set up by the African Union to follow up people who had atrocities in their countries when they were in power. So here's my point. Build your relationships with governments. That's another key thing. Here you think you can actually here do business without government. When you go into any other country, my advice is your first port of call should be government relations. So whereas here a government relations executive is a non-essential member of the executive committee, maybe to comply with BEE requirements, when you go into Nigeria, into DRC, your government relations is your economic diplomat. He must be top of mind, he must be your top gun, because you're not going to get anywhere without good government relations across the continent.
Mm-hmm. I want us to, Lisiba, go ahead, but I want us to get a quick response as well, because if he's an investor wanting to move into African economies, you need the certainty of the legal background. Exactly.
I was going to say property rights are very important, and when the World Bank does the ease of doing business survey, they include that very much. What is of note is that out of the top 10 countries that have moved quite a bit in the index value, 6 out of the top 10 are from Africa. So that has been identified as a problem in the countries that are making strides. Cote d'Ivoire, it's on the list here. Senegal, Democratic Republic of Congo. There is some strides to make sure that property rights are adhered to, because I do think it's critical.
Mm-hmm. But the truth of the matter is that legal framework is not going to change in a day or a year.
That's exactly it, Gugu. It's you got to decide for yourself, what is your risk appetite. There are businesses out there being very successful but have a high risk appetite because they're operating in a very complex regulatory environment. They're operating in an environment, as we explained now, where you can't rely on the legal system, you can't rely on regulations. But they have that appetite and they're saying, this is the reality, what do we practically do to counter that? And it's up to each business to determine whether they want to do that or not. But my caution would just be, the longer you sit on the fence, the less the opportunity will be.
Because think about it. President Obama left Kenya yesterday. Where is he now? In Ethiopia. You want to talk property rights to Ethiopians? You know how those guys do their development in Addis? They come to you and say, Kuku, you have this house, you have a mukuku next to a 10-story building. They move you out of town. They give you some condominium. They give you a subsidy. There you are. Talk about property rights to those guys. Why is he there? He is there because he wants to get Americans to invest in Ethiopia, and he understands he has to build that relation, government to government, so that he can then get his investors protected. So what do I say to South African investors? Follow your own government. South Africa has a high priority on economic diplomacy. So when you go into any country, your starting point here before you leave should be DIRCO. Find out who your representative in that country is, make sure they know you are in the country, and make sure they pay some of those things that you can't do yourself. Because that's how China dominates us. How do they do it? The premier comes in, he kowtows to whoever politically, behind him is lawyers, accountants, bankers. When he leaves to the next country, they stay behind, they close the deals. They won't have any obstacles because their government-to-government relations is top-notch. So we need to start doing that ourselves, cash in on our own economic diplomacy. And I can tell you South Africa is very advanced in that regard. That way you will bypass all these potholes without ignoring the risk management that Philip is talking about.
You mentioned something very interesting, because before the ad break we had a very interesting discussion about the involvement of China. And Andrew, maybe if we can get your feedback briefly, there are clearly lessons to be learned here. The way forward, is it practical? Is it doable?
Certainly is. The investors are coming into South Africa in ever greater numbers. It is the high growth, it's the new frontier. We've done research around that. We see that they are coming, Gugu, and that it will be for years and decades to come. It's for us as South Africans and for us as Africans to harness our own economies and to build those partnerships and grow with those foreign investors that come in.
Any of you speak Mandarin here on the panel?
No, I don't, but I respect the Chinese for what they're doing.
Not yet. I think maybe it's best we walk through some practical examples and using maybe South African companies who have managed to chart the way forward when it comes to exploring activities on the rest of the continent. Standard Bank itself, SAB Miller, ShopRite, MTN, well-known companies who are juggernauts when it comes to their operations on the rest of the continent. And you mentioned two things, Victor, which I'm hoping that we can explore with Andrew and Philip further together with Leseba: technology as well as upping your game. And you gave us a story as well in your book where you mentioned that the prices in ShopRite when you're on a trip, I think it was Nigeria.
It was in Uganda.
Were at a premium. And you were surprised by that because in South Africa, ShopRite is considered to be a more affordable option for consumers.
It's true. Obviously, ShopRite will have a case. They transport most of the stuff. At the time, they were transporting a lot of stuff. So they were bound to cost more. But also, what was the quality of supermarkets in Uganda? The story in the book is about my experience in 2007. So there were not many supermarkets to speak about that had systems that were tidy and everything inside. That's what I found. And of course, unless you come across the Uchumi juggernaut or Nakumat, although Uchumi is struggling, if you're in Kenya or some of the countries they are dominating, you're going to find that. Here's the example. I call it the sunlight example. If you go into any supermarket anywhere in the world, you'll never find somebody holding a green sunlight bar soap, considering whether they should buy it or not, whether they are wealthy or poor. Why? Because the quality of that soap bar is impeccable. It's got 200 different uses that it performs without fail, but it's not expensive. So that's what I'm saying. Then when I say up your quality game, I say don't go into a country and dump what doesn't work here. Don't take your poor performers here in South Africa and dump them in Nigeria. They'll let you down. MTN did not send their under average performers. Companies, and I can tell without mentioning names, companies that sent their second-rate performers to start businesses across the continent failed dismally. I'm not going to tell you who. But Standard Bank doesn't go around saying, well, you know, Philip, we don't know what to do with you. Go on some executive Siberia in Angola, because he will mess up your business. You need your top performer. You need somebody who's hungry to perform, who's got a reputation to protect, who's smart, who understands diplomacy and is versatile. So that's how you're going to do it. When I say up the quality game, I mean in the quality of people you send. And Andrew here talks about educating people. In fact, many South Africans got educated by the people they found in the countries they went to. For instance, you talk about our IT here, you think it's superior, right? You go into Kenya, you go into Rwanda, you're on a bus, you've got free Wi-Fi, 4G. Here, when you sit here, even now, you try and get on a Wi-Fi, you're going to need a fancy password that you can't remember. You go out into a country that's supposed to be inferior, and you find that they have prioritized things that we take here as a luxury. So who is more advanced and who needs to educate who?
How do we use that technology then to leapfrog certain areas of development, like we've seen with mobile money in those economies that you've alluded to, M-Pesa, which work very well in Kenya and other markets there? How do we leverage on technology, Leseba, to help it become an enabler for economic growth and also assist corporate companies that Philip and Andrew here speak to advance their growth prospects?
I think that has been identified and it's used effectively. in many of these countries, and that actually is testament to why we've seen that the banking sector has improved. We have seen that it contributes a lot more on the GDP situations. It makes sense. It makes sense that the technology that's elsewhere in the world being developed, we just use it more effectively here because we don't need to have those high initiation costs, that high cost of R&D. It's been done elsewhere, we just implement, and it makes a lot of sense. I think it's been done successfully.
Yeah, I think you also got to get that traditional mindset out of your mind when you go to some of these countries. Some of these countries are so innovative, and you can't come with your traditional, well, B follows A, C follows B into some of these countries. In some of these countries, they're being so innovative, they're skipping B. Yep. They're going from A straight into C. And you got to go with that mindset because some of these countries are just so open to new things and are completely, in a positive way, ignorant of the old way of doing things. And you got to, you got to embrace that.
Andrew, you are resident bean counter here. Is the mindset also changing in that regard?
Yeah, I still get back to the point that you need to find the local professional. We're a services firm. Find the local firm. It doesn't have to be Grant Thornton. We'd prefer it to be. But find the local lawyer that's going to help you navigate those complex regulations, to help you navigate the tax laws, to understand the local economies so that you can de-risk your investment. And so we would say find the right local partner. And we as a company, and I'm sure Standard Bank have got it, they pretty much cover the whole continent now. So wherever you want to go in the 54 countries in Africa, you'll find professionals through our offices who will be able to introduce you to other professionals. Find the right guys to partner with. Don't come in with your outside information, your outside great ideas from Europe or from America or from South Africa, but partner with the locals.
What about the South African mindset? I'm happy because so far on this panel I haven't had to correct anyone by saying when you venture into Africa, because so often when you interact with our colleagues and co-workers from across the continent, they mention that South Africans have South Africanisms that you refer to in your book. Andrew, clearly this is a mindset that you've also had to adapt when liaising with your clients, that South Africa is not in isolation to its peers on the continent.
Sure. Indeed. Yeah. South African laws and regulations are very different from each country. Each country is different. Yeah, the Europeans haven't got it together with the EU. I'm not sure we'll get it together easily in Africa. We are so different as individuals. Our laws are so different. Our ways of doing business are so different. Our customs are so different. It's not going to be easy to have one major economy, but to look at each area, separate economy, separate rules and regulations, find separate individual local partners.
Here's the South Africanism we must get rid of. Our exco must be very diversified. So even companies that say we are African in orientation, we're thinking, still have a South African domination on their exco. Big mistake. Because your stereotypes, and ask Philip, he's in a bank, he will tell you that when you do risk profiling of a project in Lagos, no, forget Lagos. Lagos is easy. In Juba, South Sudan, I mean, what are you going to ask for? You can't ask for a McKinsey survey or an AC Nelson, whatever market scan. They don't even have a fixed telephone line, right? So how are you going to assess it? So if you have somebody who's based here in Sandton, who wants a very good spreadsheet that is going to give them returns and IRR and what, the only IRR you're going to understand is to catch a flight, land in Juba, walk the streets, you will come back here understanding. The problem is, if then you have to report to Andrew, who thinks, and I'm not picking on Andrew, I'm just saying, if he's based here, and his mindset is, yeah, but where's the SWOT analysis? Well, SWOT analysis is, you are the weakness, Andrew, because you are not where I have been, all right? So I'm trying to show you an opportunity. I'm showing you an opportunity that I saw standing on top of a table. You are standing under the table. You can never see it.
And it's not just exco representation. I think it's even below that. It's where does your decision making sit, and it's how do you develop the skills in those respective markets to be able to make those decisions there, and not having to go to London or to New York for a decision.
Oh no, you are doomed. If you have to go to London or New York, you are doomed.
Although I think the a lot of lessons that can be learned from South Africa. For example, in the pensions industry, in the asset management industry, even in incumbent African countries, there's a collegial relationship that comes where we could share information with them and they could learn the same. What I mean particularly is that there's a lot of reform that's happening in the pension industry. There's a lot of consultation that's happening with South Africa. Admittedly, we are ranked #1 in the world in terms of financial services. That is something that we can export. And I think there's an understanding elsewhere in the continent that there could be a lesson learned there.
But no, I beg to disagree. Export, no. Why? You know, 2-3 weeks ago, a bank in South Africa said, hey, we are innovative. We are launching a mobile phone service. We will be launching it. You know who launched the mobile phone service last week? Equity Bank. And I'm telling you, there are many people here who might not even have heard of Equity Bank. Right? Why? Because Equity Bank is run, it's a collective scheme. So if you come, and by the way, James Mwangi has been twice the Financial Times African Banker of the Year. So he is worth something, he knows something. So if we're talking about export, I'm hoping you're meaning export with a lot of modifications and willing to even localize whatever you're exporting.
Yeah, that's right.
Because if you export the South African risk management that got the big 4 banks where they are now, you won't grow. And that's why when one of the big 4 is saying we are launching a mobile service, last week Equity Bank has already done that.
Victor, Lesiba, I think your point has been made, and Victor, you have clearly alluded to the substance behind your argument. But in closing, I want to wrap things up. At the top of the show, we've got numbers on a scale of 1 to 10 as to how optimistic our panel is when it comes to the African continent. Andrew gave us 5, Philip gave us 7, Lesiba gave us 6. Clearly, I take it your number on your level of optimism on the African continent is a lot higher.
I'm all in.
Number?
I'm all in.
Scale of 1 to 10. We've got a 10. On that note, let's get closing comments very quickly about the 5. In order for us to get it to a 10, where Victor sits today, what will it take for you to see increased optimism on the African continent? So that your number changes as well, Andrew.
We've got a lot of change around the corruption, the bribery, the underhanded way of doing business we hear about. A lot more commitment from governments to enforce the laws in their country and to make it easier for foreign investors to invest in their countries. And if they want to resort to the local legal system, to have a legal system.
Philip, you're 3 points away to getting where Victor is. What will it take to get us there?
Gugu, I'm a banker. I can't be all in. It will be irresponsible for me to be all in. So as much as I'm bullish on the opportunity in Africa, we have to acknowledge that there are risks. We've spoken at length about those risks, and we've spoken about mitigating those risks. So I think we've covered that, but I have to leave an element of responsibility and keep with that 7 out of 10.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Lesiba?
So for me, it's fiscal policy. We need to diversify our sources of tax revenues, improve tax collection. That's number 1. Number 2 is that we can learn a lot from Mauritius. It's a small island, but they've done so much in terms of opening up the economy, and some of the policies that they've introduced are actually quite something to learn from. So there's a lot more that can be done. I think 6 it's about 50%. So getting a 60% in an exam is not too bad, but much more can be done.
Are you happy to pass?
Yeah.
Victor, we'll leave it on that note. Thank you so much for your optimism and participation in the panel today, as well as our audience members for posing their questions and their views today. While a big thank you once more to all of my panelists, Andrew Hannington, who's the Chief Executive of Grant Thornton Johannesburg, Philip Myburg, who's the Head of Franchising for the rest of Africa at Standard Bank, Lesiba Mutata, who is the Market and Economic Commentator at Investment Solutions, and Victor Khumeswana, who is a business specialist. While we have it around about average and slightly above average participation and optimism when it comes to the African continent. But one thing is certain. You need to place your bets on Africa because it's certainly a continent on the rise. Do join us again next time on the Business Agenda. For CNBC Africa, I'm Kukuletu Tsele.